to, I think, somebody who sits at that hub of design, sustainability often sits in that same role of you're touching every department and you're trying to bring everybody together. Is it the same approach then that you would recommend if there is a leader who's trying to take that sustainable design in mind? Like how does that translate over to maybe less pure design, but more thinking of it, or perhaps more extending the idea of design to also include that idea of sustainability?
Yeah, and sustainability needs to be integrated on step one. And I've also experienced many times, also, before COVID, even sustainability was still not that in demand, even from the market. And I think folks are realizing that it's a need to have. It's the right thing to do. And I think you can still get away with it in the market, but eventually it'll catch up to you. So I think it is the right thing to be doing. So with regards to sustainability, since I'm a product person fundamentally, so when the client says, and I'm making this up, let's make it red, blue, and green, right away I think of, because it'll look great in photography, let's say, I right away know that's carrying a lot of inventory that we probably won't want to do. There's minimum orders that are attached to that. I know the issues with using red dyes. I understand then the plastic is going to have to be virgin plastic, or right away I start thinking of all these things which affect sustainability and affect the bottom line and affect all the other aspects. So it's, if you want multicolors, let's say if that's an important feature, then we would solve it in a way that already considers those limitations, and maybe you design parts of it that are easy to interchange, and so on. So the whole point is, whatever the ask is, integrated in the beginning, and then if we look holistically in this contextual approach, we solve it. And but to try to clean it up later, it's really difficult, it's expensive, and that's where I believe the market can see where a company doesn't really have their act together.
Actually, to extend that thought, I learned this stat the other day through another guest who focuses just on circularity. And she was talking about something that 80% of a product's environmental impact is determined at the design phase. And since that time, I've been just picking brains of different designers I know and asking, is this even part of your curriculum? Like, how do you think about it? And it's kind of been a little bit of a hodgepodge, I'd say, depending on who I'm talking to. But
Yeah.
how did you become aware of it? And if we have, let's say, designers who are listening and saying, I
Yeah.
care about this, how do I educate myself to learn more?
So it's so great question. And so as I mentioned, I'm 25 years in this design space. I have not had any formal training around sustainability. I think some younger designers are now.
Right.
But the fact is, the sustainability, as we call it, is it's a moving target. It's an evolving target. I think folks that were educated 6 months ago, they're dealing probably with some of the relevance now. And so the way that I solve these problems, and it goes across the board, it could be physics problems, it could be electrical problems, optical problems, it could be a list of things. Sustainability, let's say, being one of them, I bring in an expert. I bring in folks that know inside and out this subject. And so that's another aspect of this contextual approach, is I don't pretend to know anything. In fact, it's like being the orchestrator, and you need the percussion instrument. Let them do that. I'm not going to play all the instruments. I can't. And so it's really about bringing in the experts. And over these years, I've had the privilege of finding just incredible talent and keeping these relationships. And we bring them into projects as needed to bring that expertise.
I think it's very honest, too, that we can't be everything. I remember thinking, because I come from a marketing background, I remember what we were learning 15, 20 years ago, but I remember social media was just starting to boom and there was nothing in our textbooks about it. And
Yeah.
just by the time you print and educate, there is a lag. It's the reality.
It's amazing. And I have this a client that they lead the industry in sustainability in the contract furniture space. The company's called Human Scale. And I go visit with them. I design products for them. I do a lot of strategies for them. And they have an entire sustainability team. They have material scientists. They have experts all around material. And you walk into the room and you see just piles of crazy stuff. I have some actually sitting right here on this desk. And a lot of this stuff is unbelievably interesting. 90% of it is not for scale. It's not for manufacturable. And so that's the other side of it. And it takes real expertise to say, well, then how can we truly make this thing sustainable? And some of it is you use mild steel, or some of it is you're using wood. It turns out it's not some kind of new eco grow the thing. Like it's actually could be very simple. So depending on the application, it's understanding the processes as opposed to, let's say, applying a quote unquote sustainable material. And so I think it's a lot of ways to solve it, and you need folks like this who are expert to actually guide you.
And are you seeing more and more conversations around circularity of products, kind of that end of life of a product? It sounds like, and I love that you bring up the idea of maybe less end of life, but you brought up the idea of inventory. That's also an extreme source of waste.
Yeah.
But is circularity making its way into more of these conversations? And how are you seeing this being reflected?
Yeah, two sides of it. We propose even to some of these major companies, the furniture world at least, contract furniture. So office spaces typically are changed roughly every 8 years or so, and as leases expire. But furniture is designed to last good 20 years. And so what are we doing with this furniture? So we would propose furniture as a service, and everyone thought this was kind of a crazy idea. Like, why would I rent furniture? But when I think about the building I live in New York City. I live in a 10-story building, and I have a hammer, and I think about
You use it
I,
often?
I know how often do I use it, right? And I think I use it once every 3 years, but when I need it, I have one. And then I think everyone in this building probably has a hammer. So there's probably 500 hammers in this building that everyone uses once every 3 years. And I said, well, why? Why don't we just have like two hammers in the building and then we share it as needed? And then you start to think about, well, why doesn't this apply everywhere? There's so much redundancy and, in my mind, therefore waste. And so when I look at circularity, these products, I mean, are designed to last really a lifetime. And maybe there's one or two parts that are designed to be swapped out, and then the lifetime can continue for another 20 years. So it's finally being embraced. And we're seeing it more and more. And again, this company, Human Scale, we've just launched actually a circularity program with the seating, and it's interesting. It's being received super well, and so I'm starting to see it more and more, thankfully. Companies like Apple and so on have already been doing this quietly with their refurbished program. They're there, and but I think folks still have to get their head around what does that mean. Even, for example, sustainability. When I just click back for 1 second, I think folks have an expectation for what design needs to be, or a product, or let's just say a product needs to look and feel like, a kind of fit and finish. And a lot of that is not aligned with sustainable practices. So let's say a shiny white plastic thing, it's very hard to make that a sustainable material out of a sustainable material. So I think we'll see in the next I think it's maybe it's a little slower than that, 10 years, a new kind of aesthetic that happens to be beautiful to us then, that is actually sustainable. I think we have this image of kind of brown as sort of the only thing that can happen with a sustainable solution. And I think nobody wants, let's say, a brown computer. So, but I think we're going to find an aesthetic that's actually acceptable for everyone, that is sustainable. And I think so, when in terms of circularity, I think we're going to embrace what that means and not feel like, oh, it's kind of old furniture or it's old products. I think we'll understand it's part of this kind of communal reality of life.
I think you're absolutely right that it's such an education to. I was speaking to somebody who is in the recycling side of plastic, and he was saying, kind of nudging it back to me, saying, well, you oversee marketing. When you're putting pressure on designers to have a product look a certain way, and let's say be matte plastic on one side and then shiny on another, you're actually creating issues in terms of recyclability. Also, when you're insisting on a certain color code, to your point,
Right.
are you then also having an impact on that? So I think it's all of us becoming more aware of how we're all woven in together.
Yeah, I think that's right. We'll find, I think, a new language in a way, and I think we already are seeing it quietly. I mean, Apple, again, as an example, is using machined aluminum, and that was kind of crazy at the time. Then you realize it's 100% recycled, and it can be 100% recycled. So this is fantastic. Whereas the plastic computer, folks can say it's recyclable. I'm sure your friends made this comment. Most plastic doesn't get recycled, and there's not a facility that actually handles it. So, okay, it's recyclable by chemistry perspective, but it's not actually being done. So, whereas aluminum, it's always going up in value, so can always be recycled. It'll be scavenged from the trash to be recycled.